Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Forcefest. This is day 2. We are raising money for Make-A-Wish Foundation. You can find all of the links on our social medias, and if you're on Get Vocal, you can see it in the chat. Today, we're going to be talking about how Star Wars has helped us with our mental health issues, whether it's day-to-day, big issues that we've dealt with in our life, or helped us understand other people's mental illness in our lives through the storytelling of Star Wars. I have Rick Villanueva from Jam Transmissions with us, and Maria from Sistas With Sabers. Maria, I would love to hear some of your life story first when it comes to your experiences with mental health and Star Wars.
Sure. We can get into that. I now that I've had the therapy and all that, I can see that there were signs really early that there were problems within my household, but it didn't become apparent until almost later. When you hear that?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So it didn't really become apparent until my parents split, and there were problems with the divorce. Alcoholism and domestic violence were a part of our everyday in our house. And it just got worse as I got older. Eventually, it got to a point where I was using alcohol and drugs to cover it. And the trauma that was already happening out the substances. Being someone who's been sexually victimized multiple times without the presence of treatment, support, aid, those type of things, it makes it very difficult to transition into normal life. And at the time, I was very lucky to have a student guidance counselor that really cared. And she really supported the idea for me to get treatment. My mother did not. She felt that therapy was for people that had problems, and it wasn't for normal people like us, and I didn't need it. But without that contact with her, I don't know that I would have felt safe later in life to seek that kind of treatment. So that continued for a couple of years. I finally got to a place where I was just a complete wreck, right? They call that like the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. So I finally decided to, well, I didn't decide. People told me, you're going to treatment. You need help. Even then, I wasn't sure if I needed it. But I went anyway. And I stayed for 30 days. I dried out. I got my shit together. I wrote in the journals. I did all the stuff. If you're not familiar with a treatment center, it's a place where they send addicted people to talk and get the help they need. They're surrounded by other recovering addicts. People come in and give leads. They come in and they talk to you about what it was like for them to get clean. So all that happened. And
now, Maria, quickly, sorry, before you jump into that, because I know your connection with Star Wars is coming in a second. If you would be able to refresh and come back into the room, because your connection's getting staticky for people listening. And I want to make sure people hear you when it comes to that. So if you want to refresh, come back into the room. We'll keep the room unlocked for you to jump back in, and we will see if that clears up some of those issues. Once again, like I said, we are the Rebel Alliance, not the Empire. Some Jam Transmissions. All right, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think that sounds a little bit better.
Okay.
What do you guys think in the chat?
I still hear it. I don't know. I hate to think it's me, but
you're still not hearing it?
No, I mean we can hear you. Let's just keep on moving, and hopefully, because I do think it sounds a little bit more clearer. So go ahead and just continue, because yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I'm actually in the Smokies, so I'm not at home. So normally this would be a lot better, but My husband really wanted to have a weekend trip where it was just us, and so I said, I'll do this real quick and then I'll be right back. So, where was I at? Oh, the treatment center. Okay, so we checked in. About 20 days into that, I found this old VHS tape of The Empire Strikes Back, and I loved it. There was this little green guy that said that, you know, you could overcome these fears, and I was like, oh my God, this shit is live. Like, I've got to find out more about this. And from everything that I heard and what I remembered during the prequel trilogy, like, there was no more Star Wars. I'm like, oh my God, that's so sad. I love this thing. Like, it really, at that point in time, it was what I needed to hear, if that makes sense. I've never been a really religious person. In fact, some people who are associated with churches were really nasty to me and could have been part of a sexual abuse thing, but we won't get into that because that'll bring it down, I think. Anyway, so I'm really distrustworthy of religious people. Like, I don't trust them in general. But for whatever reason, Empire really spoke to me. And I was like, oh shit, I need to find out more about this. 2 weeks later, this little robot guy came on in the lunch hall and told me that this thing called the Clone Wars was coming. And I was like, oh, it sounds like a Star Wars. And I was super excited. And I remember the first, like, movie or whatever, it came on TV. It was like 6 to 7 or 6 to 8 or something like that. And 8 is when the mess hall normally closed. And I think at that point in time, Clone Wars started at 8, like, normally. And I begged the, like, lunch lady and the security guy. I'm like, you guys can sit here with me. I'm not going to do anything. I promise I'm not going to start a fire. Like, I need to see this. And so that's where I was every Friday. I made the commitment, and Clone Wars was there for me every week. It was a reason to stay, you know, to just not do anything else. I just got to make it till Friday. I just don't have to take a drug. I don't have to drink until next Friday, because forever just seemed too long at that point in time. So I could make that commitment every Friday. I'm going to do this. And then I met Ahsoka, and it's like, oh my God, there's a woman with a lightsaber. She doesn't know what she's doing either. Great. And I really connected with Clone Wars at that moment. It was a special time. It was a very special time. And okay, there's that. I knew I would do that at some point, but I'm like, okay, I gotta stay strong so I can get through all this shit. But Clone Wars has always been very special to me. And that character, Ahsoka, really, I see myself in her. You know, she's grown, and so have I. And now we're both at this place in our life where we've accomplished so much. And people said we couldn't do it. So I don't know. I'm very connected to that character for that reason.
Now, you have a daughter now, correct? And what's her name?
Yeah, Ahsoka. Ahsoka Ray. She's 2. She just turned 2.
Mm-hmm.
She's a good kid. And I never thought I would be a mom. I never thought I would live past 26. Like, the way that shit was rolling, like, I didn't think I would live to see 30. Like, I knew that I would. The people that we were hanging with were dangerous. The things we were doing were very dangerous. And I look back at that stuff and I'm like, I robbed this guy with nothing. Like, I faked like I had a gun, and like, we could have been shot or killed, or you know what I mean? But it's really unbelievable to see like how far you come. But it's also about like redemption, right? Like, that's a Star Wars theme, right? So it's like, It's on my shoulder. I don't know if you see that,
Vader.
but it says redemption. Anyway, I believe very strongly in that stuff, that anyone can change. Like, don't count people out. You never know. But through it all, like, I don't know if I would have the strength to move forward without Star Wars. Like, I lost my sponsor, and if you don't know what a sponsor is, like, they become like your leader through that journey. And it was the same time that Ahsoka met Vader. It happened at the same fucking time. And I'm like, oh my God, like, it's just so fucking timely. You know what I mean?
Hey, Maria, I love the enthusiasm, but let's keep it PG just in case there is any people.
Oh my God, are there children in here? I'm sorry.
Just in case, yeah.
I'm sorry.
If we haven't heard it in a Star Wars film, let's not hear it at Forcefest.
That's right.
However, yes, losing someone's sponsor is awful, especially while you're still in treatment, because they are usually people who have gone down that same path as you. And when you lose that, you kind of feel like, wait a second, what direction do I have? And you kind of have to learn on your own. Is that kind of what you saw with Ahsoka? Is now she really knows.
Absolutely.
She really knows now that she is her own leader. She is her own destiny.
Absolutely. And it's scary to be that free, but at the same time, I think it's what was necessary for her to move beyond where she was headed.
And how has Star Wars fandom helped you? Because I know that especially since you started your podcast, you just have this group of people around you that love and care about you and want to know what you feel about Star Wars. So what has the Star Wars fandom done for you?
It's become more tangible recently. Like, I've always had an affiliation with fans, but it's been very loose. Since the podcast, like, I finally met Black women that are into Star Wars.
Right.
For me, that was like, wow, that's a moment, because I've been to tons of cons and listened to a lot of podcasts. I've never heard our voices, like, for us, by us, out there. And it's been so amazing just getting to know the women of the group. Like, we don't just podcast, like, we call each other, we support each other. You know, Raven, her car got damaged by a tree. Like, a tree fell on it. Like, we were there, we called, and we supported her through that. Like, I've never had a stronger connection with women, and women of color specifically. So I think it's been really awesome. It makes me feel a lot less alone.
And I think that is extremely important for you to head up a podcast like that, is to make other people not feel as alone, because that's the great thing about the internet. Sometimes it's not so great, but is when you do something on a platform like a podcast, it is spreading that message to a bunch of different people. Even if they listen for a couple episodes of yours, they know somewhere deep down that they're not the only person of color in their life that's a nerd about Star Wars. And that is extremely important. So do you think, going through all the stuff that you've gone through, even though it's obviously been awful, that you being able to make it throughout to the other side, that you're ready to spread that awareness and spread that type of message through Star Wars and your podcast to other people maybe struggling right now?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no better time than right now, especially with quarantine and people not being around other people. Like, it's okay to say that I need help. It's okay to say I need to find someone in the community that's familiar with this. I know that not everyone always feels comfortable sharing that kind of thing about themselves, but if nobody says anything, then nothing gets better. So, if you want to judge me, that's totally cool. I've been judged my whole life, so it's not new. But I think now is the time. And I think there are some instances of people that are getting really open and honest about what's going on and what they've been through in their lives through the lens of Star Wars. And I think that is resonating. I'd like to see more.
And I noticed Ahsoka's middle name is Rey, correct? So what has the story
Yep.
of Rey helped you with when it comes to just your life, and why does that name mean so much to you?
I think Ray can be an insert for many, many things, but we did a whole podcast on the biracial experience and Ray's journey and how they kind of mirror each other. So I thought that was really important. And also, she's kind of the light in the darkness. She doesn't always know which way she's going, but she's able to get there. And I really like the idea of putting the two names together, because I think Ahsoka represents the. I tell people that the translation for Ahsoka is she who makes her own destiny, right? And I think that the translation for Rey is she who follows her heart. So I think those together send a really good message, and sometimes all you have is your name. I know I wasn't born with a lot of money, but if times get tough for her, I think that she can look back and see wow, I have a really strong name. I can do whatever I need to do.
If I could jump in just for a second, Maria, I want to talk about that episode you did concerning Rey. First of all, I love you. I love all the sisters on the show. I want to thank your husband for letting you do this for a little while today. I think he's great too. Hey, so the Rey episode that you guys did, my wife listened to it, and she's biracial, and she's also adopted. And that episode afterwards, she was telling me about how much it spoke to her, like in her soul. She's not here with me right now. She went to go meet. She's meeting her birth mother right now for the first time.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then we are going to go meet the whole family in a few hours. So it's a pretty special day for us as a family, as a unit. But specifically that episode, we don't talk Star Wars a lot because she's kind of sick of the nonsense because it's all over our house. But she expressed to me how much that episode spoke to her, because she was able to identify with a lot of stuff, especially what Raven had to say, being biracial and growing up. Neither, you couldn't identify with one or the other without putting yourself in a box, but you also had people putting you in that box against your will because you didn't look a certain way or you didn't talk a certain way. And for her, I know it helped her gain a little bit of sense of her own individuality, and especially with everything that's going on right now. Again, meeting her birth parents, her birth mother, who is a Black woman. She grew up in a Jewish household. She's got this whole other claim to her identity now. She's got all of these brand new family stories, and her family is rooted here in Michigan, and they've been here for the better part of a century. And they've got, just, I don't want to get too much in, but they just have a very rich history that now my son, who is essentially triracial because I'm Mexican, he's going to have this whole other history that, that he's going to be able to identify with the themes that you guys were talking about in that episode. That's going to help him shape his own personality and individualism as he gets older too. So I think what you guys are doing on your show is fantastic. And I think we're at a time in Star Wars podcasting where it's not about the movies all the time. It's not about the shows or the books. And a lot of times it is. But I think since there is this quote unquote downtime for Star Wars, it allows for shows like yours to talk about things that are more, I don't want to say important, but more topical, more personal, and how people express their fandom, because it's not always about just sitting in a movie theater and pew pew and lightsabers and stuff. It's about how it makes you feel. It's about what you want to talk about after you leave the theater experience and how those characters impact you. And obviously you and all the sisters have deep connections to these characters in a way that I can't understand, but I appreciate everything that y'all are saying about these characters, and I love all of you for it. Don't cry. I'm not trying to make you cry.
Thank you. No, I was setting up because I didn't want to talk over you. I'm like, no, you're great. Thank you. I'm so excited for you and your family. Congratulations on
It's
making
it's
that
been a really crazy
connection.
time. Yeah.
And I think that's great. That's great though. I mean, more connection is always better. So that's great. I'm happy for you. I think the biracial experience is just not
Mhm.
one that's talked about enough because it is a different path to walk. And because none of us look the same, like it varies
Mhm.
depending on who you talk
And I
to.
think, like you guys were talking about, Rick, you appreciating, you don't understand how the sisters necessarily feel, but you appreciate that they understand it. And that's what I think is the most important part of it is I can't sit here and say this is what people who feel like Ray probably feel like, because that's not who I am. However, I'm so happy that there are people out there who are getting their voices out in the world and heard, who do understand those connections, because once again, like I said, it'll make other people relate and say, you know what, I never looked at it that way. And I appreciate them helping me understand not only these pew pew movies, like Rick said, but also just my identity and who I am as a person. So, Maria, I don't want to keep you too long because the background of where you're at, because we can see you, it does look beautiful out there. So tell everybody who's watching how they can find Sisters with Sabers. And once again, I thank you for all the time that you've given us today.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for correcting me. I'm so sorry for cursing. That's so not what I wanted to do. I forgot just that quickly. I'm like,
Right.
I am
It's the
myself.
passion.
But
Like I
thank you
said,
so much
I
for
understand
that.
passion when I hear it.
I am so sorry. I didn't want to offend anyone. Sistas with Sabers is available anywhere it's available, any podcatcher. We're on Anchor for sure, Spotify for sure, Apple for sure. We just did a spot. I just did a spot on Steel Wars. But more importantly, right now, we're trying to get a new image for the character Trave Karras in the High Republic. So that's our big initiative right now, is to see about getting better representation in the High Republic
Mhm.
before this thing hits the fan, to try to get the word out. And you can see the petition. You can sign up there on my Twitter at Blurred Girl Jedi, and the podcast
Okay.
is at
And that is
Sabers West.
Sistas with a AH, correct? Yeah. Sistas.
AS.
Okay, perfect.
Sistas.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria. Enjoy the rest of your time off. Thank you for being so honest.
I
Of
love you
course.
all. Thank you so much for having me. So
No, no,
sorry to
no, no,
clutter the
no. Have
room.
a good time off. Goodbye.
Bye, Maria.
Bye.
Okay, Rick, you were, I love the passion that you were giving back and forth with Maria there. You were giving a lot of insight into a little bit of your story. I would love to hear from you next, if you feel comfortable with sharing what mental health and Star Wars means to you.
Yeah. So my Star Wars story is quite different from Maria's, and she comes from a very unique perspective. I think we all do, but I'm an OT kid. I was 5 when Return of the Jedi came out, and I remember going to see it a couple of times over the summer of 1983. And we think thematically about what that movie is. The themes of redemption, the rekindling of the father-son dynamic between Luke and Anakin. Um, a few months after Return of the Jedi came out, it was the Saturday after Thanksgiving. My father passed away. He took his own life. He had been dealing with a lot of issues, and a couple of specific things happened that made him make a very drastic decision.
Mhm.
And growing up in a house like that, for my brother and I, my brother's 2 years older than me, we were kind of rudderless for a while. My mom did everything that she could to keep the ship sailing. We had a lot of support from family, and it was a couple of years before I started to realize that I had a lot of anger about it, not really understanding why. And I've come to understand that the why isn't what's most important. You know, it's the what led up to, you know, all of the little steps that made my dad make the decision that he did. And Return of the Jedi specifically became kind of my emotional support animal. You know, for a lot of years growing up, I held on to that anger like really tightly. And growing up where we did in the mid to late 80s, you know, our outlet was music and skateboarding. And, you know, in the late 80s, you know, skateboarding it's not what it is now. You know, we weren't looked at as good kids because we skated. You know, you could watch after school specials, and the kids that were skateboarding were, you know, they were rolling doobies, you know, out behind the school or something. You know what I mean?
They have a blunt behind their ear.
Yeah. Which is stupid. I mean, we were just kids, but, you know, a lot of my anger came out in the music that I listened to. You know, it was a lot of punk rock. You know, I grew up listening to a lot of hip hop, and you can hear this, you know, that immediate anger and frustration come out in a lot of the music. And that was my outlet for a long time, until once I got into high school, or just prior to high school, really, that anger started to fall inward. And, you know, I remember having our VHS tapes. You guys on Chatter Squadron were talking about which were your first. Mine were the Fox CBS ones. I remember buying them at a flea market of all places.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And Return of the Jedi, that movie growing up made me hurt so much, because I wanted to have the relationship again. I wanted to have, you know, to be able to say, you know, I understand, or I forgive you, or any of those things that I could never say and have somebody hear it, you know, namely my father, because he was gone. But that was, I mean, I was Luke in that moment. He got to do that for me. He got to have that story in my place. And it wasn't until, you know, years later, probably around the time that the special editions came out in 97, that it really started to hit that that's what that movie was for me. That it was my coping mechanism. It was, you know, the relatable redemption arc between a father and a son. And when the prequels came out, you know, and, you know, the character of Anakin was more fleshed out, it made the impact at the end of Return of the Jedi that much more. You know what I mean? It was more emotional, because we had seen the downfall of this person. We had seen the things that led him down this path. And it wasn't that he had necessarily made mistakes. He thought he was trying to save somebody.
Right.
And it took him down a wrong path. And that's ultimately what I see for my dad, is that whatever problems that he had, what he was going through at that point in his life, were things that he probably did not want to project onto us. You know, he was not by any means, he was never the disciplinarian in our house. You know what I mean? Like that. My mom was always the one that, you know, grounded us, or, you know, whatever, you know, we didn't get hit or anything, but, you know, he put that on her, because he knew that he could lose it. He grew up in a household that wasn't very supportive of him. He was an artist and a photographer, and my grandfather, he didn't understand that. He was a World War II veteran. You know, his life was a lot different and a lot harder. He had seen things that neither my dad nor myself could ever understand. And it just wasn't a supportive place for my dad. And once he got to a place where he was able to express his artistic side, you know, have those freedoms, the world started to cave in on him a little bit. And he left, you know, but again, you know, Star Wars thematically has always been for me about just that, you know, that redemption, that forgiveness, people being welcomed back into the fold. And it's not just the Luke Anakin story anymore. You know, it's those couple of lines in The Rise of Skywalker of, you know, you were a spice runner, you were a stormtrooper, you know, that kind of stuff. Like your past doesn't always have to define you. You know, you can work your way away from those things and make better choices. And I know for myself, having these movies, these stories in my life has been so cathartic at times, to be able to look at things through my own lens, and and how they've helped me. But now the tables have kind of turned a little bit, because now I have my son who's 10 years old, and I get to see Star Wars through his lens. And it's a completely different thing, and it's a lot of fun. So a lot of those issues they don't exist anymore, because I'm able to see these things in a different light, and kind of the joy that it's out of them, as opposed to the redemption arc that I see him getting excited about new characters and things like that. So it is nice to be able to have that part of it kind of compartmentalized, where yes, it is cathartic, it is therapeutic for me in a way to watch these movies that are extremely entertaining. I mean, we love all the flash and the bang and all of these movies. But now, like I said, for me to kind of flip that on its head and have my son to watch these movies through vicariously, it's a completely different experience now. It's not just where I was. It's about how do I share these stories with him. And eventually we'll get to a place where I can tell him what these movies have done for me. He doesn't know a lot of this stuff yet. But he knows that I have this passion for it. I mean, I have a podcast about it, and I'm doing this with you now, but he doesn't understand a lot of my own connections to it in regards to his grandfather that he'll never know.
And with you being a father now, I mean, I think the story in and of itself is extremely powerful, of seeing this movie, Return of the Jedi, with your father pretty much right before he passes, and going through your own rebellious state and denial and all of your terms of grief. I think that's extremely powerful. But now here we are all these years later, and you're a father. So from your perspective, seeing it from the other side, what's it like being a dad watching Return of the Jedi and having a different perspective on that story? That it's not, you're not just only being able to see from Luke's eyes, you're kind of seeing from Vader's eyes. So has it changed any for you, Return of the Jedi?
Yes and no. I think the scene when Anakin walks in on the younglings in Revenge of the Sith makes a little bit more sense from it. No, I'm just playing. I would never do anything to myself. But
this is why I was concerned about bringing you on, Rick.
I'm joking. Okay. No, the movie has changed a little bit, because now the father-son dynamic is between myself and my son. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily just about me and my father and those all of the coming to terms with the emotional issues that I had through that experience. It's mm-hmm. now these bonding moments that I get to have with my son. And he's also at a point now where he's into other things, but he knows that Star Wars is that thing for me, at least. That I can present this mythology to him and kind of help him understand things, through that. They're fables in a way. It's a way for him to understand certain kind of lessons. And as a father, as most kids do, they don't want to listen, but you can sit them in front of a screen. You can have them in a movie experience or some kind of storytelling experience, and they'll pick it up that way.
Right.
Understanding ideas of sacrifice by watching like the Marvel movies or something. He gets that because he's seeing it. It's one thing to have somebody just kind of lecture you about it, because that's every time we open our mouth to him, he's like, I don't want to be lectured, but that's parenting. You know what I mean? That's right. Just what it is. So yeah, it does change the perspective for me. And if I can tell a quick story, when we went to see The Force Awakens, he was 5, and we went, I think maybe 2 weeks after opening day, because we weren't sure if it was going to be too much for him, it was going to be too intense or anything. Mm-hmm. And when the movie started, we're in a dark theater. It was just him and me, and the screen goes dark, and you get those couple of seconds.
I'm getting before as you'd say this.
Yeah. Just before the fanfare pops up and it's bad and Star Wars comes up and the letters, are moving away from the screen. And then the crawl starts with the John Williams music. Normally I would be just as enraptured as he would be in that moment, but I turned and I looked at him And he was so wide-eyed, looking at words on the screen. Nothing had even happened yet. He was reading, and he was just like, and it was so exciting. And he was so excited about this thing that he knew that I liked, but it was his own experience as well. And I just remember just turning, looking at him, and just, he's reading, and he was so excited, but he was laser focused, and like everything in me just swelled. And I was just like, I wonder if the feeling that I had was like a feeling that my dad had,
right?
You know, going to see this movie with my brother and I when we were little, if he had a similar experience, or if he was just as geeked out as we were, because I know he was a fan of the movies too. So it was a very full circle moment, and it was a moment that I hope to never ever forget. You know, it was pure magic, just the look on his face, and it was beautiful, you know?
Well, it's that thing about becoming a parent and becoming even a mature adult, is you start to appreciate the people around you that you love being happy more so than you yourself. Sometimes if you just break that down in a mental capacity, the first thing that happens in this new movie that you've been waiting to see, you know, Rick, and the first thing you want to do is look at your kid and what they do, and it becomes about them. And it kind of goes into that whole, we pass down all we know, you know, and a lot of the terminology they use in the sequel trilogy is about these changing of generations and what it means from one generation to the next. And so I thought that was amazing how you put it. That is kind of true, that you might have had that exact same feeling, or your father might have had that exact same feeling back in the 80s and 70s. I would love to share some of my life now, if that's okay. I'm going to take a quick sip of water because this is going to be interesting. This is my emotional support water. So Star Wars has always been an escape for me to a galaxy far, far away. While growing up, I used to make up my own stories and characters instead of pretending to be somebody else. It helped keep my brain occupied, especially being homeschooled. That's something I don't know how many people know. I was homeschooled all the way through. So if you ever go, man, that Tyler guy from Chatter Squadron's weird, that's where it comes from.
The second I met you, Tyler.
I'm like, oh man, this guy's homeschooled. When I just turned 13, my father had a heart attack. He survived. When I was 14, almost exactly a year later, my best brother and my mother were in a car that was rear-ended by a tank. They once everything stopped. Homeschooled co-ops, no weddings. My brothers had it was just me and of course going to homeschool every day was just staying exactly where I was. So it was being surrounded by that scenario. But Star Wars once again became a coping tool that I started to use as I developed anxiety and depression, and I was already dealing with ADHD. The Star Wars galaxy was the perfect escape for my mind to go to create my own story. When I was 17, I had my first mental breakdown. I had my second when I was 20 and my third when I was 24. Around the time of my second breakdown, around 20 or 21, a close friend of mine attempted to commit suicide multiple times, getting very close on several occasions. She went into a psychiatric hospital a handful of times, and I would call and visit her every single time. It was around that my love for Star Wars returned because The Force Awakens was being released. I remember working at a bagel shop and seeing the trailer in the office, and I made the other manager get in there with me and just watch it with me because I needed somebody else to watch it with me. And I always say that my love for Star Wars was reawakened when that happened. And because of all the stuff I had going on, because of not having enough good coping mechanisms at the time, I started to process what was going on around me through the lens of Star Wars again. People and events in my life would play out in the galaxy as I daydreamed, It helped me understand my situation without the added anxiety of delving too deep into the mess I had going on in the real world. I started in the Star Wars community by writing articles for Star Wars Theory. When that led me to starting my podcast, Chatter Squadron, it was right before The Last Jedi came out. So all of a sudden, several things happened once this podcast I created got started in November of, 2017? The fandom gets split in half by this latest movie. I have my third mental break, and I was going through a rough patch and together for years, about years at the time. I had a choice to the podcast, and I chose to focus on positive instead of the negative going around online, and especially language of Star Wars to help make people laugh or into the saga for an escape. Since the start of my show, I've attended group therapy, personal therapy, went to specialists, did workbooks, got a psych eval, which was really fun. It wasn't. Started taking medication and started being more open with the people around me. While a lot for me has changed since I started on my Star Wars journey, as well as in my life, the movies still help me cope with my surroundings. When Luke said, "Confronting fear is the destiny of the Jedi," I understood what that meant for me personally. While I don't have to fight Vader or Kylo Ren, I still can confront fear of living day to day with mental health issues, as well as making the best choices to maintain my mental health. And so that, of course, was pre-written just so I could get myself through it. But I want to talk about that last couple sentences there. Making the best choices to maintain my mental health. I would say that is the biggest reason I've had 3 mental breakdowns by the age of 27, because I didn't have good coping mechanisms. I didn't understand how to ask for help. And I also didn't make choices that were the best for my mental health. I either took too much on or I denied too many things. And what would happen is I would either be crushed by everything that I was taking in and not releasing, or I would ignore everything around me. And then once I realized what was going on, it would all flood in and my brain just wouldn't necessarily be able to take it. But I think that's what's different this time around. And I think that's what's interesting when it comes to this Star Wars journey, as I was referencing, is while I've been making Star Wars content, I've also been working on my mental health, like there was at one point I was going to 5 different sessions for my mental health every day. That would be crazy. Every week, I had something basically every day, either a therapy session or a psych eval or whatever else it was. And while I was doing that, I was still making the show every single week, doing Chatter Squadron, doing videos, doing whatever else we did. And I think the difference, like I was mentioning, is now I'm actually working on my mental health in any way I can possibly make. And I'm making the decisions that are best to maintain my mental health state. I know now what that razor's edge feels like when I'm like, this is too much for me. This is too little. And being honest with people. And why I want to share my story is before I got all this help, about 3 years ago, I was the person that would not want any help. I don't want any medication. I want to figure this out on my own. Big, strong boy. Like, that's all I wanted to do. And it wasn't until my mental breakdown just stripped everything away from me, literally everything away from me, that I said, okay, I don't have the luxury this time around. I don't have the luxury to say, I'm going to figure this out when I literally want to jump out a window because it's bad. It's too much. It's too much to handle. What can I do? So I have to find help. And sometimes, and I think that's why, that's why I wanted Maria to speak as well, because hitting rock bottom is sometimes the best way to build that foundation again. And I hit rock bottom. I rebuilt a foundation and I built a new house on top of it, instead of just sitting down there and wallowing, or instead of, guessing that things will just change and I can do it on my own. I had to make that decision of, am I going to try and make this work, or am I going to ask for help? And my brain really made that decision for me, was like, you need help right now. And what I want for people to understand is, especially in the day and age we live in, and especially with the type of stuff like Rick was talking about, where podcasts are more oriented towards this sometimes, don't feel any type of embarrassment for getting mental health help, because, and I'll get scientific, we're not talking midichlorians, but at the end of the day, sometimes people's brain chemistry is just off. And that's what I have. When I have ADHD, my brain chemistry is off. It's how my brain is made up. And if I pretend that that's not a thing, and if I pretend not to, or if I actually do nothing to help that, it's almost like I have an open wound, and people look at it and say, why is your arm gushing blood? No, it's not. It's not. No, it's not. Because it's just something that has to do with your head. So I urge people to think about it in that way. We need to think about mental health as more as health, if that makes sense. It is going to the doctor. It is getting help with what you have going on with you. And I just want to say that because I don't want people to have 3 mental breakdowns like me. I don't want people to have to go through all these things in a crisis mode when you're falling apart, and it's like, I need medication now. I need therapy right now. Trust me, you are very privileged if you're able to say, I think I'm going to go see a therapist, because some people don't get the opportunity for that. And I think something Maria probably went through in treatment is, you don't really have the opportunity to say, you know what, I think I'm going to help myself with this addiction problem I have. It's right there. It's happening all right now. So feel free. And especially now, and I'll stop rambling because I know I am, but especially now with the phone therapy sessions, basically everything's done by phone. I feel like it's never been more acceptable and accessible to start therapy when you can sit at home and just talk to someone on the phone like you would with a friend or whatever. Always try and find the right therapist. Sometimes you don't have the right fit, but I literally think everybody should have therapy in one way or another. But just know that it's important while you have the decision-making skills right now to say, I would like to get help with this type of thing, and don't let it wait. Don't let it be that dam that's going to bust through and pour out onto a village. If any of that made any sense.
What I wanted to kind of add to that, we kind of still need to get to a place where the stigma needs to be erased from mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people look at it as like, you're going to see a therapist? Like, what are you, crazy?
Right.
There needs to be a little bit more of a normalization of that kind of treatment. Like you were saying, the ADHD brain is different than, you know, people who don't have ADHD. It is a chemical imbalance, and it is something that has to be treated, just like you would any other ailment. And if you don't seek the proper help, like the analogy you made, you're going to bleed out.
Yeah.
It's not something that can be ignored. You know, it is medicine. It is a part of our body.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that is intangible because there are thoughts. It's the way our brains work.
Right.
It's not literally an open wound that you can see.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is mostly dealt with internally. And, you know, having an outlet like this to be able to have this conversation with you and Maria. It's a podcast every week with Peter on Jam Transmissions. The conversations that we have just as friends, you know, we've talked plenty of times behind the scenes, just calling each other up and saying, you know, hey, you know, I think I can tell things are off. Are you okay? Mm-hmm. Those things, they mean a lot, you know, especially if you spend so much time internalizing your feelings, not wanting to get them out, or have a general unwillingness, or, you know, you're not man at, you know, feelings, you know, that's to have, you know, access, like you said, to any kind of help. Right. is extremely beneficial. If you can get professional help, even better. Right. But, you know, rely on your friends, rely on your family, be open enough to have these conversations. And more importantly, be open enough to listen, to have a compassionate ear and not be judgmental about anything. You know, we don't know what anybody is really going through unless we either ask or they tell you. Mm-hmm. And even then, like a lot of things, it should never be met with, well, then here's what you need to do. it has to be more of, wow, I understand, what can I do to help, instead of, well, here's what you have to do.
So sorry,
and that all starts with conversations like this.
Something big I've learned is just how to talk correctly. The way you talk sometimes changes everything. And like you were just saying there, if somebody opens up to you and says all this stuff to you, a easy question, it's an easy way to change the way we talk, and it makes it more accepting and more safe for us to connect with each other is, would you like some advice, or do you just want me to listen to what you're saying? And when you ask that question, you put those variables out the window, because either they do just want you to listen, or they are coming to you for advice. And you don't want to assume, oh, I shouldn't say anything to them, when they're like, I wish they told me what to do, So little things like that, just little ways to say things, do you want some advice right now? Or I can just listen to what you're saying. Little stuff like that makes massive, huge relationship differences. And one of the things I was trying to put forward, because I was rambling too much, was just being able to identify your specific issues. That's been the biggest thing for me in my mental health journey, is being able to identify what my mental issues are. I have depression, I have anxiety, I have ADHD, I have panic attacks, I have all these things. When you put that in a closet and don't open the door ever, that doesn't mean that they're not still in there. So once you start understanding how those things feel for you when you're anxious, I'm anxious right now doing this live stream, to be completely honest. But I know I'm anxious. So what do I do when I'm anxious? I breathe. I focus. I calm down. That's not a taking meds thing. That's not, I have to call my therapist thing. That's I've learned what and cope with. And sometimes that's what it is. Understand what's going on inside your brain, inside your body, and then you make adjustments as the days go on. When you don't, and that builds up months at a time, and it finally blows, that's when we have these issues. And I think it's important, before I go on too far, is not everybody has available mental health professionals. That's just an unfortunate truth in our country, and a lot of countries. But in America, we some people don't have Medicare or any type of help when it comes to that. But I can say, as someone who's done public like group therapy sessions, there's a lot of support groups out there. If you've dealt with some type of PTSD thing, there's probably a PTSD support group in your area. You can just search for it. They'll show you. There's like we meet at this church at this time. You just show up, you sit down. You don't have to say anything. You can just sit and listen to people's stories, because I've done it. I've sat and listened to people's stories who've dealt with similar things to me. And by the time it comes around, when I was like, I'm not going to say anything, I want to say something, because I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that today, and that, and that. And just hearing people talk the same way will help you move forward. So even if you don't have the means to call up a therapist right now, maybe check that out. I wish I had all of the links to all of the group therapy that is in your area. But if you are dealing with a specific issue, there's probably even an anxiety group therapy session somewhere near you. So I just want to put that out there, because I don't want to make it seem like everybody can just call up a therapist.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's all important, to let people know that the resources are out there. And, a lot of times, and this is kind of one of the hard things, is getting over that hurdle of like you were talking earlier, of knowing that you need the help, being willing to make that first phone call, or ask that first question, or, any first step like this, I imagine, is probably the hardest step in a journey to a better mental wellness state. And we all go through these kinds of things, so.
And this is what like Forcefest is all about. We had the loss of Celebration, which is basically everybody's family reunion. When they go to Celebration, they get to see all their friends again. And we wanted to put something together. We wanted to do a weekend where people could feel that way again, to recapture that somehow, some way. So I know this weekend is kind of wrapping up where, we have the last panels happening today. But throughout the rest of this weekend, do everything you can to reconnect with people and ask how they're doing. That's a big thing that I wanted to stress too when it comes to just the way you talk, is when somebody asks, how are you doing? Answer truthfully sometimes and see what their response is, because that's how you find who the people are that truly will take the time to care and talk to you. Don't go too deep, but if someone asks, hey, how are you doing? Oh, awesome. Don't just sort, yeah, it's been a day. And when you do those little things, you break down those barriers, all of a sudden it's easier to talk in front of all the people we're talking to right now and saying, listen, I got a messed up head, but I'm not going to deny that I have a messed up head. But yeah, so feel free, do everything you can to turn to your extended family in Star Wars. And before we go to plugs, and I thank everybody who's been a part of this, I just wanted to tell a quick story about Rick, actually. One of my favorite moments of last year's celebration was Rick coming up to us and being like, Chatter Squadron. And we were like, oh my gosh, people know who we are. And then, of course, it's Rick, who's been a longtime listener. And we've done Star Wars stuff together. We've worked together on different things. And this Christmas, after I had a very big separation from my ex, was the first Christmas alone, basically. And I'm in my new apartment and everything. And I'm getting ready to go to my parents, at least. But then all of a sudden I get a phone call coming through. Oh, who's this? Oh, it's Rick Villanueva. And Rick called me last Christmas just to see how I was doing. Make sure, like, hey, man, I know it's been a crazy year for you, but I just wanted to talk to you, see how you're doing, catch up with you. And that's the power of Star Wars. The one thing we have in common is Star Wars, but yet we're able to make that real life connection, check on each other, because we are this extended family. You're a brother to me in the Star Wars fandom, Rick, and a lot of people are siblings with me. I would say Maria is my sister, if I can, because just to keep it on brand. But no, that type of stuff is extremely important. And I just wanted to put you on the spot, Rick, and say I extremely appreciated you doing that. I loved it.
Well, you're welcome. The meeting at Celebration last year was, it was big. In a weekend filled with big moments, it's those kinds of connections that's why we go back. We don't always go for the trailers and things like that. I don't think I went to a single panel besides the Fallen Order panel at Celebration last year. And most of that time was spent on the show floor meeting people that I had been in my ears, for a couple of years, listening to different podcasts and stuff. And you guys always made me laugh. And I wanted to, I just wanted to meet people and, either tell people that their shows are appreciated or, just be friends with people. And I think that's the power of the community in and of itself, is that, not only can we meet at a celebration once every year and a half or 2 years, but we can do stuff like this. We can call each other. We can, especially right now when the world is basically telling us that we can't be together. The technology allows us to be closer than we've ever been before. And that's a really important step to everybody's mental health, is, like you said, just having conversations, asking how people are doing. And I'm glad I could be there for you. I knew that something just wasn't right. I could tell. We have two things in common. A, we love Star Wars, and B, we're both extremely handsome. And we both have senses of humor. I mean, that's another thing that I think is important. We have to have some kind of levity to even conversations like this, So I love you. I love Maria. I love the people in the community that I've met, people that listen to our show. I'm new to podcasting. I love my co-host, Peter. He's one of the greatest guys I know, and I've never even met him in the flesh. We were going to meet at Celebration last year, and we just didn't cross paths. So, thanks for you and everybody for putting this fest together. I'm glad I was able to do this with you and have this conversation with you and Maria. To everybody that's in the chat, people that have been donating to the Make-A-Wish cause, I'm kind of like awestruck that, the community has come out, pretty early on a Sunday morning to listen to us talk about our problems. You know what I mean? I love everybody that's involved, that's been involved with this. And I hope this sense of community never, ever leaves the fandom, because everybody that I've come across, at the top of that hill, is paramount to my own life experience right now. And I wouldn't change anything about how my fandom has gone over the last couple of years. So
thank you, Rick. I love you too. I love everybody in chat. I since you thanked and loved your co-host, I love Mike Calhoun as well. Yesterday we did several panels, and just the way we're able to pull things together. I love his tenacity, that one, and those panels can be watched VOD from yesterday. We did an artist showcase and also a comedy in Star Wars panel. But Rick, how can people find you and find Jam Transmissions?
So yeah, Jam Transmissions, it's a weekly show. We encourage fan interaction. We want people to send in emails and voicemails. The email for the show is comlink@jamtransmissions.com. I'm going to do a Peter and say it. He does the way he does. COMLINK@jamtransmissions.com. You can find us on Twitter @JTComlink. And you can find me on Twitter @CadBainesBounty, generally geeking out about Star Wars, talking to my friends.
Yes. So I am about to put in the Get Vocal chat. There is the Jam Transmissions Twitter. And people can find the Chatter Squadron podcast every single Tuesday. This Tuesday, we have a Celebration specific episode where we talked about what would we be seeing if Celebration was around. But yeah, it's a weekly comedy podcast. You can find us everywhere @Chatter Squadron. And we just released on our Facebook page, which will be in the chat in 3 seconds here, a little video we did where we did a game show on the show floor of last year's Celebration called Main Course or Uses Force. So if you're missing that show floor feel, go ahead and check that out. Once again, I want to thank Rick. I want to thank Maria. I want to thank Chase, who was our admin for this group or for this panel. And I want to thank everybody for staying so lively in the chat and being honest. Let's keep that positivity up. Let's keep that honesty up. And let's, like a lot of you guys were saying, if you need time to talk or want to talk to somebody, reach out to the people in the chat. This conversation, Rick, I appreciate it. I love you, man. And
I love you too,
we
man.
will talk to you soon. Remember, check out all of the other panels that are happening this weekend. Also, check out the Grant Imahara panel that's coming up later today. Adam Savage from Mythbusters will be on that panel. And of course, Paramount, that Make-A-Wish, donate to Make-A-Wish, and let's make some wishes happen. So thank you guys. We love all of you, and may the Forcefest be with you.